This is Three Brothers Movie Reviews, and we just got finished rewatching M. Night Shyamalan's Split. The movie came out in January 2017. It is written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Film stars James McAvoy, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Betty Buckley. And the film is about a man named Kevin who possesses dissociative identity disorder. 23 separate personalities live in Kevin's body. And you discover along the way that there may be a 24th personality. And one of these personalities, named Dennis, has kidnapped 3 girls, and they are trying to peel back the layers of Kevin, as well as a psychiatrist named Dr. Fletcher. And all of these storylines go along, and they're trying to survive and or protect Kevin. And so before we get into this review, we're going to issue an explicit spoiler warning. This is going to spoil the entire movie. It's difficult to talk about this film without talking about spoilers. You can talk about it. You can talk about the performances, some of the storylines which happen.
But if we do talk about it, it will be very surface level and bland.
It's better if you cover your bases. So we would recommend watching this movie. It's been out for a while, and a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about that's like kind of secretive about this movie, it's going to be out in the open in a while. So
if you have not seen this movie, look away now, turn it off, watch the movie.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So
and then come back, because we have more to say.
Please do. So let's get right into this. So the big question with this movie is M. Night Shyamalan back? So M. Night Shyamalan hit this slump. Like he made Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then all of a sudden everyone was like, whoa. Like,
what happened to our hero?
He seemed like this unstoppable force of nature, and like some people didn't like Signs, some people didn't like The Village. Yep. That was really the movie that just like destroyed his name. Where all of a sudden,
and then it wasn't just that; it was multiple movies. It was Happening. It was Avatar: The Last Airbender. It was
it continued.
It was just there wasn't just like one bad movie. It was several.
Like I said, a slump. It'd be like if Spielberg did that. If all of a sudden just his movies just dropped off the map and were panned. Yep. And recently he did a movie called The Visit. And we have not seen that yet, so we can't exactly say if he's back, more or less, but we can say how this movie feels in regards to his past films, his great movies like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. So, Dan, do you think that this movie is a return to form? Do you think Shyamalan is back on track with this movie?
I would say yes. Evan and I had actually talked about how John Carpenter had a real struggle getting movies made. And he usually stuck to just like B-movie content, but just kind of infused it with A material. And I feel that M. Night Shyamalan, especially early in his career, did a very similar thing where he would make a ghost story into this really interesting psychological drama that became The Sixth Sense. He took a movie which at its fundamental core was a superhero drama and made this really interesting psychological drama called Unbreakable. Like, I think that this is his wheelhouse, psychological drama, usually dealing with similar like B-movie material, but just infusing it with just A-level creativity.
And A-level characters.
So I would say that this is a return to the kinds of movies that made him as popular as he was. Like, those were, like, in order, Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, and The Village. I think those 4 all were some of the best work he had done to that point. And when he started to go off track is when he started to do stuff that really was outside of that realm. And I think he took some risks, but a lot of those risks just didn't end up paying off.
Like Lady in the Water. Like Lady in the Water, clearly a movie which he wanted to make.
Yes.
But other movies which weren't so quality and possibly humbled him. Like, that's what I feel with this movie is maybe he learned, like, how to get back on track because of, like, some of the reception. Maybe he started taking the criticisms to heart, so.
Yeah.
Gavin, do you think so? Like, you haven't seen all that many.
I haven't seen all that many, but I have seen the majority. I have seen him at his highest in The Sixth Sense. I've seen him at relatively the same high inside of the Unbreakable, just Unbreakable. And I've seen him at his lowest of lows in the crap house when he's doing Avatar. Was it just The Last Airbender?
It was just The
Last Airbender, yeah.
No Avatar there. Ong?
Ong.
Oh yeah, they called him Ong in the house.
Don't start.
There's a lot of bad stuff in that movie, but that's not the point of this review. I think I've gauged him enough to see what his good stuff is and his bad stuff is. And Split's up there with his good stuff. He's returned to what he does great. He does great with making characters and people. He really does a great job with making his characters feel like real people and giving them personalities, giving them each their own traits, and showing their characters and their character arcs through a very unique story. And Split has done that for me. Split, I feel, is his return to form. I feel that he might be back. I would love for him to be back, since he's arguably one of the greatest filmmakers to come out of the box in a while. And I'd love to see him do his A-grade quality again, because he's been down in the slumps, and I hope he rises back up from the ashes and builds back his empire.
Yeah. I honestly haven't seen enough of him to gauge that. Like you were talking about John Carpenter a little bit. Mm-hmm. I feel I've seen enough work from him to like determine like if he made a movie today, like if it like how that would be. And I still want to see more of his films,
right?
But I haven't seen quite enough of M. Night Shyamalan to know that. I'd love to have seen.
What have you seen so
all
far?
All the movies. I've seen The Sixth Sense. I've seen Unbreakable. I've seen The Last Airbender. I've seen Split, and is that about it?
So you haven't seen The Village or
I haven't
Signs?
seen The Village yet. I need to. I haven't
Have
seen
any of us
Signs
seen
either.
The Happening?
No. I own the Blu-ray. It's right over there.
You own the Blu-ray?
Oh yeah, I got it.
We need to see that!
Plastic. Talking to a plastic plant.
Next time.
We're doing a review of The Happening now.
Oh yes. Yeah, so
I'd love to see that.
So I need to see more of his movies to get a full gauge. But I've seen those two highs for me, which I just absolutely loved, which was The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable.
Yeah.
Those are the movies he made first. Those are the movies people love. Mm-hmm. And this movie feels in that same realm. Like psychological horror boosted to excellent standards by fantastic characters and filmmaking status. Mm-hmm. So that's what I love so much about this movie. So let's get into positives here. The characters and performances.
Yes.
So James McAvoy,
the man.
Oscar worthy.
Yes.
Very Oscar worthy. Like this was a January movie. It's so unfortunate, but
this was a January movie.
This was a January
Shocking.
movie. So yeah, like what he does with his face, what he does with his body, the way that he manipulates himself.
And since we have
it's not that he just talks in different voices. He doesn't just like start speaking this way, start speaking that way, like high, low, change his voice. He actually changes his body.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him a selling point inside of this movie.
And since we have creative liberties to go into spoilers, and
yes.
we have nothing.
Yeah.
There's a scene where James McAvoy is talking to the psychiatrist, and he's playing a character called Barry. And Barry's a very lucid and kind of relaxed person. But really, it's a character called Dennis, who's acting as Barry.
Yeah.
And Dennis is a very stiff and composed and neat person. And the psychiatrist suspects that she's not actually talking to Barry. And she gets him to reveal himself as actually Dennis. And the way James McAvoy just transitions, it's not just that he like loosens up and like stiffens up. He just changes.
His face.
Yes.
Like, it changes.
Like he changes from this happy to this just...
Yeah.
And
it's difficult to show. Like,
It's subtle and perfect.
Yeah.
And amazing.
It really reminds me of an interview that I saw Hank Azaria give when he was talking about The Simpsons and how he voices several characters on there. And he says one of the most difficult things for a voice actor to do is to do an impression of one of their characters through the voice of another character. Ooh. And he told a story about watching old Looney Tunes cartoons where you have Mel Blanc voicing both Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. And in the episode in the short they're in, you have Bugs dressing up and pretending to be Daffy along with a voice, and then Daffy doing the same and pretending to be Bugs. And just what's really interesting is like,
how would you do that?
How like
you have
in
to
this
portray your character
exactly
through another character who's also yours,
right? And just how tricky that is. Like that was what that scene felt like to me. It was watching an actor playing a character pretending to be another character, and it was completely seamless because it wasn't just him playing the character and like having maybe some frayed edges. You're like, oh yeah, like he just shifts and all of a sudden he's Dennis again. And there's little things like that where it's not simply a voice, it's not simply physical mannerisms. Like he plays there's a personality named Patricia who's like this like very strange like woman in her 40s who's like very precise and careful, and she has these little like isms, like she'll like purse her lips together or she'll like kind of hum to herself. Like it's not just,
and she's very polite.
Yes, it's not just
and
obvious
very
things.
Creepy.
It's not just the obvious things. It's these little quirks of personality that are in there.
Yeah.
Each personality of Kevin feels not like a personality, but like a person.
Yeah.
Every single one is their own person. And you don't see
they
all
all have...
24 inside the actual film. You don't see all of them.
The film
but
only
you see
credits like 8 or so.
Snippets and like blips of most of them. And each one is so different and so unique. You're like, man, how did James McAvoy do this? I still don't know. And shows true acting potential.
And it's really difficult. Like, I think the biggest takeaway for me is I think a movie like this could be tanked if the performance didn't work.
Absolutely.
Like, this is a movie that really rests on him being able to handle the humorous elements of his character and the horrific sides of his character.
Because there's a lot of funny stuff in
the
there.
CD player scene. Yeah, there's this scene where the character Hedwig, he's 9 years old.
A 9-year-old boy.
Inside of Kevin's body. And then he takes Anya Taylor-Joy's character Casey into his room and he starts playing Frog Bass by Snails, and it's like this crazy, like metal song, and he's just going insane, just like... And it could be like unintentionally funny. And
exactly.
And it's supposed to be funny.
It is funny.
It is.
But the way it's done, it's just unsettling at the same time. You're just like, this is not right. It's not like laugh at it. Like, it's not like slap your knee.
Because this kid inside a man's body is hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's also terrifying.
Yeah. Because he's kidnapped these girls, and ultimately you're watching this whole movie through their eyes. And so everything that he does... It might be funny, but it is horrific because this is their kidnapper who's switching between this 9-year-old boy, this like OCD terrifying man with these like horn-rimmed glasses, and like this really strange petite woman. Like they're just trying to figure out what's going on, and this guy is the most just something is off about him. That's confusing and terrifying.
Okay, so jumping a little bit over here, let's get into the other characters inside of the film. So Casey, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Yes, James McAvoy is stellar in this movie, absolutely brilliant. But Anya Taylor-Joy is really good.
One of my favorite actresses working today. Like, I've only seen her in a few things. Like, I think the first movie I saw her in was probably The Witch.
Yes.
And it's interesting to watch The Witch and then watch this movie because very different characters, but I think both movies really play to her strengths as an actress, where she can really just command your attention with very little. Like in the first opening 5 minutes of the movie, she hardly says a word of dialogue, and most of her performance is in how she carries herself and how she reacts and responds, and I think it's really difficult to do that.
Because a lot of the movie, she has this kind of blank face. Not a blank face, but a face that would seem on the outside like a normal, natural face, but it's still filled with a lot of emotion in there. It's it's hard to explain that.
Yeah.
A lot of emotion packed behind what would be like...
She's deliberately isolated herself, and so you have to be able to portray someone who's emotional, has a lot in her, but is keeping everyone at a distance and hiding it away.
There are these flashback sequences which occur throughout the film. They're sprinkled in where we see her interacting with her father and her uncle, and then you start figuring out as it progresses that something is not right because we keep cutting back to these flashbacks.
Right.
And
Like,
then you
what's
figure
so
out
important about this? This
and
can't be
then-
just filler.
and then you figure out at the end that she has a sexually abusive uncle. And
Yeah.
then like I remember seeing that reveal in theaters and
Yeah.
It's the
hit hard.
ultimate,
Gut
just
punch.
like
Yes,
gosh.
and like that reveal does so much. Like from that point on, you figure out why she is this way, and
That-
like
I guess
the movie doesn't
if that was
like
done wrong, that could feel very, just like cliche.
like they
Like,
did it,
oh,
like they
that's
did it
why
just for her
she's-
character,
yes.
but it doesn't. Like her performance is so good, and then that contextualizes her performance.
Exactly.
I really loved something. We ought to honestly have our dad watch more of these movies with us because when I learn a lot from his reactions. There's a moment early on in the movie where Dennis comes in. He has a chair with him. He sits down. He looks at the three girls that are captive in the room, and he grabs one of them to bring her outside. And Anya Taylor-Joy manages to get a hold of this character briefly and just says, "Pee yourself." And she's dragged out of the room, and even before she comes back in the room after she's peed herself and Dennis is disgusted, my dad just sat there for a moment. He's like, she's smart. And I love that this is a movie that really points out things about the characters before you even learn about the fact that she has an abusive past.
It's the way that they behave, which you learn so much about them. Like, that's what's so nice. This is a movie about three characters. It really is. It's rock solid on these three. So let's talk about Betty Buckley, because, like, she's honestly one of my favorite parts about this film. And
She's great.
since we're talking about spoilers here, okay, Glass is coming out. We'll get a little bit into this later on. I wish she hadn't died. I felt there was so much potential for her character. And I honestly think she would have been so interesting to see more of in a future film because, like, there was so much depth and, like, it's heartbreaking to see her die in the movie.
That was.
It's
I
hard
looked
to
over.
watch.
I usually like seeing my brother's reactions when something happens in a movie, and I looked over at Daniel in the scene where the Beast is just crushing her back, and Daniel, with each pull, he was just.
Yeah.
And I was the same way. I was like laid back in my chair, just like, oh.
Yeah. The violence.
You can feel each.
There isn't
blow.
even any blood. It's just the way it's shot. But yeah.
And the funny thing is,
It's-
there's not a lot of violence in this movie.
No.
But it all really feels impactful when it happens, and it doesn't ever feel gratuitous.
Exactly.
It feels like
When you
every
see
bit of
something
violence that
awful,
happens is
you're like,
awful.
oh,
Yeah.
that's there.
Yeah.
You didn't expect that to be there.
And even little things, like there's a scene where one of the girls tries to get away. She manages to like find this vent that's been covered by drywall, and she manages to get out of the vent. Dennis breaks in, starts chasing her down, and she hides herself in a locker when she gets like trapped. And he finds her, and he basically just it's not. He doesn't grab her, drag her out of the locker. He just says, "You need to come out of there."
Yeah, he just asks her to
She
come out,
comes
please.
out, and he's like, he looks her over, and he's like, "You're filthy. Take the shirt off." And like, she just takes the shirt off, and it's the worst thing in the world. Like, you're just looking at this scene, you're just like, oh, it's like, it honestly felt worse than if he grabbed her and was like dragging her away.
Yeah.
Like, just like he's like she's just sitting there humiliated and exposed, and there's just something really unpleasant about that scene that just stuck with me.
Because she's
like I
doing
said,
that willingly.
like
it's
I
not
said,
her, his, it is his fault, but he's not like grabbing her. It's just.
He's forcing her to do it.
Like I said, there's the scene, the reveal with the abusive uncle. Like, this movie is PG-13, and like it doesn't feel like it's pulling any punches to
No.
achieve a PG-13 rating, but it feels intense, and it's a very dark movie, but it still feels hopeful, and like it because of the characters. It's so well constructed.
You're always hopeful because you know these characters are smart. You're like, they got to be able to find a way out. They have to.
Yeah.
And I feel like this honestly calls back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Like, is this a return to form for him? Like, I'm going to spoil The Sixth Sense for all of you. Sorry, you should watch it. There's a scene in The Sixth Sense that drives home this horrific truth about what happened to this ghost of a little girl. That is in a PG-13 movie.
Yes.
And I feel like this movie really tackles dark, brutal subject matter
Challenging stuff.
in a way that is not grotesque, but it doesn't hide the horrific feelings you have when you realize what the movie's talking about.
It's never gratuitous, but it also never waters anything down.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so...
It's like hanging right in your face, but it's not like ugly or anything.
Okay. Or let's talk one last thing for direction and cinematography here.
Yeah.
So yeah, Gavin, you go first for direction.
For direction?
Either one. Just
I want to
throw
go
it
for
in.
cinematography because this movie, you said it was
Mike Goulakis.
Mike Goulakis.
He did the cinematography for It Follows.
It Follows.
Great movie.
And I have not personally seen It Follows, but the way that this film was shot, and I like how you put it when we were talking earlier, the camera feels almost like a person, and not just like a person, but like a snake. Like something that's slithering along and silently, like a dangerous.
It's like the camera's almost always moving in the movie.
Yes.
Like it's almost never just like on a tripod. It's like always creeping forward or creeping back.
And if it's not moving, it's in a place where you're like, that doesn't feel right. Like it'd be in like a cupboard with like leaves like covering a bit of the branches and like, ugh, it almost feels like an intruder onto the scene.
There's a scene where Barry is in his room. Not Barry. There's a scene where Hedwig is in his room with Casey, and there's a moment where Casey gets into his space, and all of a sudden the camera is like right here, looking down on Hedwig's face, and it's a really uncomfortable close up.
Yeah.
And there's scenes where that'll happen where characters will get in each other's spaces and the camera puts you right there and you have this off angle that just feels really uncomfortable to be right there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scenes where you get like first person views.
Yeah.
Usually when that happens in a movie, I get really annoyed. It just, I don't know why, it just usually takes me out of the movie. I'm like,
Because all of a sudden a person's looking at the camera. That's the danger. Like usually in a movie you never look at the camera.
No.
And so when you have
Don't
a first
break
person,
the first wall,
exactly.
unless you're Deadpool. But the way that it was done in this film, it really put you into the characters, and it didn't feel annoying.
Yeah.
It felt like actually adding to the tension of the film.
Yeah. Michael Locke's cinematography, like it stands out. Like you've seen It Follows, I have too. It's like those movies translate. If you watch both back to back, you will see this is definitely the same cinematographer, not the same director, but like it's clearly the same guy behind the camera.
Yeah.
So
Wouldn't be the same movie without that cinematography.
Absolutely not. So talking a little bit about negatives here. I don't know what you guys really have, but Gavin, like, are there any outstanding negatives you have?
Outstanding negatives. There was only one that I really had a problem with, and this is more subjective than anything. This is basically my opinion, but the setting inside the film sometimes was a bit confusing for me. I didn't know exactly where all the rooms were. I couldn't really visualize the architecture of everything. I was having a bit trouble visualizing where everything was, according to like the hallway and the rooms. It was just something that I picked up on, like, I'm a bit confused in where we are, but it was just my own thing.
That's completely valid. I still have that problem with Green Room a little bit there. Like that, the setting of that movie I found a little confusing. I thought it could have been set up.
Yeah,
That's
geography can be tricky. I think the thing that I would say is a negative is I think that because the movie is really laser focused on Kevin and Casey, other characters, you don't get as much of a chance to spend time with them. And I would say specifically with Betty Buckley's character, early on, she picks up on the fact that she's not talking to Barry, and she's trying to really figure out why Dennis would be pretending to be Barry, why she keeps getting emails. And I think that just by the way they edited it together, I think she becomes a lot more concerned early in the movie. And so there's not necessarily a straightforward progression of her being like concerned, really concerned, and really, really concerned. I feel like it might be a little bit like she gets really concerned on the front end, and then she kind of like mellows out a little bit, and then gets concerned towards the latter half of the movie. So I think that it would have been interesting to see more of a slow boil of her just being concerned as a patient, like maybe he's going through a tough time, to actually being worried whether or not other people are in danger because of what's going on with him. And then I would just say that the other two characters that I feel are handled well in the movie for what they are the two other girls who are kidnapped with Casey. One of the difficult things that I'm finding right now is I remember everyone's name in this movie except for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an issue of you really don't get to spend a lot of time with them. Something that happens early on in the movie is both of them attempt to escape, and then they both get separated from Casey's character.
And then you
basically
don't
get
usually
locked
see
in
them.
separate. Exactly. So I would say that it would have been nice to spend a little more time with them. You don't have to change the fact that they get separated, but it would have been nice to spend a little more time on the front end so that it just would have built up my interest in what happens to them more.
Yeah.
Yeah. My only issue with this movie is the way that it's structured, because this movie's clearly set up. And I remember when I watched this with you, like when it was kind of concluding, you were saying at the end.
Oh yeah, hold on. You a couple of months ago, was it? My brother Evan and I went on a M. Night Shyamalan fest where he set up a couple movies that he wanted me to see. He started with The Sixth Sense, and we were gonna do like The Happening or like some other movies.
And it was all an elaborate scheme.
It was all an elaborate scheme to let me watch Split, so I could experience the ending for the first time. So.
And you did.
I did.
So yeah, he watched I watched it with Gavin, and when the movie was ending, he said like it was good, but he was like he didn't understand like what it was building to, and that's what it feels like. And I'm sure that was done on purpose. I'm sure this movie was left kind of somewhat inconclusive, so that we would be wanting more when it's revealed. This movie takes place in the same universe as Unbreakable, and that's amazing. That's so awesome. Such a great ending.
But I really hope none of you have stayed for that.
If
people
any
who
of
haven't
you
seen
have not
Split,
seen this movie, please go out and see it.
please go see this movie quick.
But that's the trouble with this movie, is it's kind of formatted as build-up. And that is one of the frustrations that I have with The Force Awakens, because that movie I also think is very good, but at the same time, it's a lot of setup. There's a lot of questions which aren't answered, and it's kind of relying on the next movie. And you can think what you want about The Last Jedi. I personally don't like it, but the
payoff is dependent on the next movie.
They hand it off to another movie, and it's like this is a great movie here.
It's like putting something off to tomorrow.
Yes, that's the trouble I have. It's a great film, but it doesn't exactly have like a conclusive and solid payoff like Shyamalan's other movies. So.
Right. Honestly, this kind of brings up what I think Dad said. Like, Dad brought up another really good point where he feels like if this movie wasn't going to be in the Unbreakable universe, either one of two things would have happened. Either Casey would have died at the end, or Casey would have killed Kevin at the end. Like, that would have been probably the most conclusive way to end this movie, if you were just going to end this movie and that was it.
And in all honesty, that's what I like about it, is that the ending ends with them both walking away, and now we will hopefully see something more with them in glass. So.
And I think the interesting thing about this movie is, and probably why it's been kind of hidden that it's in the Unbreakable universe, take away the Unbreakable thing that's thrown in basically at the last minute, you still have a really solid movie.
Oh yeah. This movie does not depend on Unbreakable.
Oh no.
It just throws that in, and it completely fits. When you see it, you're like, this will absolutely fit in a sequel to Unbreakable.
The movie's good on its own without the Unbreakable, but adding the Unbreakable in there just puts so much more meaning into the whole thing.
Yeah. It adds that little drop of value.
The very end of the movie, you hear that iconic James Newton Howard score, and it's just the neatest thing in the world. I remember, did you and I go see this in theaters together?
We did.
And I remember this, like, when the moment where we both realized it, just the jaw drops. You're just like, oh. And it was a really great moment. Like, one of my favorite memories of being in the theater and being just really surprised.
Yeah, it's so great.
I wish I'd seen this in theaters.
So, getting into grades here. Gavin, you first. What would you give this, A+ to F?
Oh, boy. I'm passing on the ring to Daniel.
Okay,
I
fair
can't think.
enough.
I'll think for a bit.
I would give this movie a B+. It's honestly, I would say that my favorite thing about Shyamalan is he takes B-movie concepts and just ups them to the best level possible. I think that this is a really solid B-movie that has some great characters, some great twists. It's really intense. It's really scary. It also can be very funny at times. And it just feels very tightly constructed. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of extra stuff sitting on the edges that should have been shaved off. It's what I loved from his earlier films, and I think that in order to like kind of find his voice now, he's going back to the kind of movies he used to make, and that's the wheelhouse he seems to work best in.
Do you want me to go next?
No, I found my grade. I think I would give this movie an A-. It has such great characters in it, and it builds, and it's tension filled. It builds its tension till the end, and man, it feels like it's M. Night Shyamalan returning. I hope it is, and I really think this is a solid movie. A-, great movie. Go see it.
I'm giving the high grade here this time around.
Ooh.
I really do like this film. Like I said, it feels somewhat inconclusive, but again, like we kind of talked about this with Suspiria, it's kind of good that like my only criticism with the movie is I actually want more. Mm-hmm. And that's what I love so much about this movie.
That's a good criticism to have.
It's focused because it's not trying to be conclusive. It's focused on 3 characters, and it just focuses for tension and character establishment.
Yeah.
And I love that so much, that the movie isn't trying to build too much, and because of that, it wraps itself up just with the characters, and then it doesn't wrap up the story. It leaves that for later. And I think for what it was trying to do, it accomplished everything which it needed to. I'm going to give Split an A. I think this is one of his best films which I've seen from him. I hope this is a return to form for him, and I'm really hopeful, because this movie shows that M. Night Shyamalan is at least talented. Like, this is not like lightning in a bottle that he just made randomly. Like, this shows talent behind the camera, that he made a movie which he loved.
Yeah, he wasn't lucky with those first 4 movies. He just lost his way for a little bit, and he's finding his way back.
Hopefully.
Good job, M. Night Shyamalan.
You will definitely see us back for Glass. We will
hopefully
be in
very
the theater.
soon.
When was the last time we were this excited for a January movie?
Oh boy, never.
Freaking never, man.
I've never been excited for a January
This is
movie.
like freaking like a Star Wars or Mission Impossible Fallout level where I'm like
coming out in January.
Pumped, like, yeah, and it's coming out in
Imagine if a Star
January.
Wars
Like,
movie, came out in January.
oh my gosh, wow! So holy cow, you will see us there for Glass. We will be seeing that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. This is Three Brothers Movie Reviews, and please subscribe to the channel for more videos in the future.
See you guys.